Jeff Yeldon. You blame it on the Don't blame it on the mirror.
Friends, Jeff Yeldon here. I'm honored and excited to be able to talk to you today about why teens are self-harming themselves and how best we can intervene, knowing more than we already know. This is a very important conversation that we need to start having, but before we can have the conversation, it's important that we're aware so that we know what we're talking about and we can be non-judgmental and be that safe, trusted, significant adult that the individual needs. But first, I need you to understand that the consequences of this behavior go beyond just physical harm, and they include depression, anxiety, social isolation, and certainly increased risk for attempting suicide. So it's important that we intervene the moment that we notice something, we hear from somebody about somebody might be self-harming, or even if you suspect these red flags are very visible. It's important that we, as that trusted, significant adult in their life, friend, we intervene as soon as possible. I want to tell you about a teacher last year that I met who in the middle of a class just noticed all the cuts on the student's arm. And the teacher came to me after and was asking, like, what should this particular teacher have done? And I simply said, maybe after class, hey, can I talk to you? And just relationships, open your heart, you notice something, the conversation. And again, I want to let you know that even though you're not qualified or a mental health therapist, you are more than qualified in the relationships to get the child talking, to be able to get the individual to the people that they need to talk to. Counselors, third-party mental health professionals, the parents probably need to know. So this teacher felt really bad that they didn't say something, and the teacher was more in shock and didn't really know what to do. I don't want you to be in shock. This is most often, when it's very visible, a person asking for help but not knowing how to say something or who to say something to, but they're reaching out. So I think it's very important, again, intervene when you can, or get someone that you know can intervene that maybe the student or the person has a good relationship with. Okay. The negative consequences combined with the fact that this is such a highly prevalent behavior in our schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges, in communities all over the world. I'll tell you something, my friend, it really highlights the fact that we really need to address this behavior and not shy away from it. Every school community I visit, the administration and counselors are amazed at how much a problem it is than they thought it was before I got there. It's an issue, again, it needs to be addressed, and you are more than capable of addressing it. So what is self-harm? Well, a wide range of behaviors fit this description, including cutting, burning, and carving of the skin, preventing wound healing, and sticking yourself with pins and needles. But self-harm is more than this. It's also reckless behavior, self-medicating, alcohol, drugs, vaping, and more. It's pulling hair, punching themselves, and such. People usually start self-harming between the ages of 11 and 15. However, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen before 11, because it does. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen after 15, because it does. But in general, let's say 11 to 15. There are surveys that suggest self-harm in teens is somewhere between, listen to this, 4% and 50%. I don't want to get into what I think about these surveys, but I'll tell you a story, and I'll let you make the decision about self-harm, who, how much, and the method in which the individual self-harms. Last year I was at a college. I was at a college up in Michigan. And after my talk, about 400 young people, good-looking gentleman comes down and he's kind of looking around, waiting to see that everybody is dispersed because he doesn't want to be seen having to talk to the mental health guy. And he says to me, he says, "Hey, Jeff, do you think, like, as an athlete, smoking pot, do you think there's something wrong with that?" I said to the young man, I said, let me tell you something. If I can't be honest, I don't want to do this. Now, it's hard to say smoking pot is bad and it's wrong when all of our state is starting to like legalize it. But I said, let me tell you this, or rather, let me ask you this. Now, let me tell you who he was before. He had introduced himself. He was a senior captain of the football team, 21 years old, nice-looking kid, smart kid. I really, really appreciated him coming to ask this question. And I said to him, I said, you know, I've never smoked pot. I've never tried it. I don't even drink. But my question to you is this. You and the boys go out, you take a hit, something you do, I don't know. Or is there something that you're having trouble coping with? Your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts. And so smoking pot is kind of taking away those feelings that are troubling you. And so you feel better, and he acknowledged me before I was even done. I said, well, yeah. He said, I'm having some problems here, getting ready to graduate, Captain. I said, that's what I want to know. I said, if you do it, you with the boys, you take a hit, it's your life, bro. But if you're doing it because you're coping with something that you're having trouble dealing with, that's where the problem is. And I'll tell you why. Because if you continue coping with life by self-medicating, you're never going to be able to cope with problems that are in your life. You're not going to be able to solve these problems that you need to do in a healthy way. So to make a long story short, I got this young man into counseling on the college campus, and he stayed in touch with me throughout his senior year, and he visited with that college counselor every single week. The thing is, he didn't know that it was that easy to go talk to somebody, but he was also afraid about what the football team would think. And I said to him, I said, hey man, listen, you're the captain of the football team. You're getting ready to graduate, an adult. If anything, you let the team know that, hey man, I'm trying to be the best captain, the best person for you. I'm super proud of that young man. I'll never forget that conversation. So moving forward, there is also some evidence that people who engage in non-suicidal self-injury are at an increased risk of suicide, although this research strongly suggests that this is among psychiatric patients. Yeah, I agree, but listen, here's what I'm finding in more teens who are engaging in self-harm. There's two feelings that I ask, and it comes out to where teens, young people feel alone. They feel like they don't have meaningful relationships in their life. And number two, they feel like they're a disappointment. They don't want to burden people with their problems because they don't think their problems are worthy of getting other people involved. And so when I see the alone and the disappointment, that's when I start to think, okay, some type of self-harm is in the very near future. I'm going to put in this link my theory on youth suicide. The link will be in the description. Check it out. Researchers have speculated for a long time that self-injury might prime people for suicide in that they are able to overcome the fear and the pain that comes from hurting themselves. And I fully agree. Here's why. When I come to a school community and I'm in this conversation with the young people, the teenagers, I ask about self-harm, and I'm not afraid to be direct and ask the question why they haven't made the forever decision yet. And so here's what they say. Well, it would hurt too much, or I couldn't do that to my friends or my family or my little sister. I'll tell you something. When I hear that type of answer, I have these red flags that are going up all over the place. And so what I find out is when they start, let's say cutting, for instance, they're afraid of the pain, they feel like they can't do it. Well, the further they get in cutting, the more they're able to tolerate the pain. And the more they're able to tolerate the pain, the less pain they feel. And the further they go without intervention, without help, then what I'm concerned about is they start justifying that maybe they would be better off if they weren't here, their friends or their family. So that's why it's so important to intervene in this negative pattern of self-harm, because we need them to have these healthy coping skills rather than the unhealthy. But the vast majority of people who report non-suicidal self-injury are not trying to end their life. They're trying to cope with life. And I don't think many of our suicides are because the individual wants to die as much as they want to end the pain and better deal with their emotions. Again, problem-solving skills, their coping skills. And so the person that is open about their self-harm, they're begging for help. They just don't know how to ask for it, or they're afraid to ask because they don't know, or they're afraid of being judged and they don't want to bother you with their problems. Remember, again, the disappointment. They don't want to be a burden to you. But people engage in self-injury as a way to cope with their emotions. Most likely, most particularly, those negative ones. Remember the story that I shared about the college football player? Yeah. Most people that talk about self-injuring themselves, well, they say it works. It calms them down, and it brings this sense of relief to them. Remember, it's the here and the now. So here is what I'm saying. Now listen, I think self-harm is a good thing in that the individual is asking for help. That is what I want to just point out right away. It's not a good thing in how they're dealing with needing help. But the fact that they can recognize something is wrong and then they can speak up, that's what I want. And so when someone comes to me and shares this, I'm so proud of them because we're able to intervene and get them the help that they need. And so I want them to recognize that it's okay. And I want you to recognize it's okay. I'm glad we're here at this point now. Now, again, it's not healthy, and I want you to keep letting them know that they have to learn to deal with their emotions in a more healthy manner. And so what I want them to start realizing is that they're asking for help. I want them to know how to ask for help, and I want them to have the courage to ask for help. My friends, let's keep talking. Let's give them the permission that it's okay to reach out, to trust in significant and trusted adults, and to learn to deal with our thoughts and emotions in a more healthy manner now. Because if we don't, well, then it manifests and appears later and throughout their life, and it's much harder to deal with it later than it is now. But the question is, well, Jeff, why self-harm? What does it do? Again, they report that it's soothing. Self-harm releases endorphins, brain chemicals that relieve pain and can produce this euphoric feeling very similar to a runner who gets the endorphin effect running. It's very similar. People use self-injury in a lot of ways that other people might use drugs or alcohol or food or gambling or sex to try to feel better in the here and the now. Young people live in the here and the now. It's not their fault. You put a card in the ATM, cash comes out, you send a text, somebody responds. You post a selfie, you get likes. But we don't live in the here and the now. People also use self-injury as a form of punishment. I want to give you 4 main reasons engaging in self-injury, both personal and social. People self-injure themselves to relieve tension or stop bad feelings. They want to feel something, even if it's pain. The individual wants to take control. They do it to communicate with others, to show that they are distressed and they need help. They do it to get others to stop bothering them. As weird as this sounds, yes. But there's also evidence that people are more likely to self-injure themselves if they have a negative body image coupled with these strong negative emotions and feelings and poor coping skills and problem-solving skills, because it makes it easier for them to harm their body. Young people, adolescents, our youth, it's a prime time in their lives for them to engage in this behavior. From a development perspective, you've got the perfect storm for self-harm. Think about it. They're navigating through these relationships. Their parents, their teachers, adults, their coaches, their friends. They're trying to fit in. They want to be accepted. Their brains and their bodies are undergoing these major changes in hormones, emotions, puberty, and so much more. And so during these years of trying to figure out who they are and go through these stages, part of the brain involved in emotion, the amygdala, I don't know if I said that right, but the amygdala, and part of the brain involved in higher thinking, the cortex, are not fully connected. And as a result, they don't communicate as well as they do later in life because the brain matures. That's why if you go to my theory on teen suicide, you'll see how the smartphone, the social media is also having an effect on young people and their well-being. They're not mature enough to understand the consequences as a result of these emotions that are having this real strong effect on who they are and who they're becoming. However, let's get back on point here. It's very common for young people, particularly our young early adolescents, to feel these high levels of emotion and really not have many skills to deal with that emotion. Remember, our youth today are struggling with coping and problem-solving skills. They're more reactionary, needing to fix their problems in the here and the now, rather than be patient, breathe, just, okay, let me process this and deal with it later. And so understand this. When the child's brains are fully developed, they may learn other, more positive methods for coping with their emotions, such as talking to a friend or going for a run, exercise, or asking for professional help. Self-injury does seem to be a behavior that many adolescents, young people, grow out of, with about 80% reporting that they stopped injuring themselves within like a 5-year period from when they had first started. Now, that's good news. But what about the people that don't get the help and continue these self-destructive behaviors? That's why we have to be more prevalent in understanding and knowing the signs. We need to be more open and honest in communicating about this in schools, because we need people who know they're behaving in an improper manner to be comfortable asking for help. I think that's part of our responsibility. But from a practical point of view, self-injury is an easily accessible behavior for young people who might have a hard time getting a hold of drugs and alcohol. And if they get hold of drugs, alcohol, and start to use, That's another form of self-harm that they don't realize. I'm afraid it's going down that path that we don't want them going down. Let's talk about vaping for a second. I often ask the question, do you think vaping is a form of self-medicating? Everybody says yes, and I agree. So again, it's another reason why we need to really get talking about this and making our kids aware. Listen, that's really all we do as trusted adults and teachers. We plant seeds. And so there's also some gender differences. Research early on suggests that self-injury is more common behavior among girls, but recent studies are showing a more even split between boys and girls. Today, research is showing that there's a higher level amongst boys than girls. But keep in mind, girls and boys might use different methods for hurting themselves, and some methods are more noticeable than others. Let me give you an example. Girls are more likely to use cutting. Well, boys are more likely to burn themselves. You might say, well, Jeff, why is this? Well, some research suggests that it's more masculine for boys to burn themselves and act out in violent ways, and it's more feminine for girls to use cutting with a razor blade or a knife or something sharp. So, treating self-harm, what do we do? Again, the majority of self-injurers likely overcome the behavior without seeking treatment. But treatment for these individuals is still helpful and strongly encouraged. Don't go about it alone. There's help, ask for help, it's okay. But as the trusted adult, teacher, parent, coach, friend, counselor, please, it's important to discuss this with the individual and help them find more positive coping skills to manage their emotions. This does need to be reported. It needs to be dealt with in a non-judgmental and safe manner as to not upset or push away the individual, that you're probably going to be able to get them to talk more openly. So I want to encourage you, don't overreact. Don't get upset. Don't try and fix it. If you're a parent, don't punish the child. I would never say I'm disappointed in you. This is a very serious situation and a very important time where you let the individual know that you care about him or her and that you're willing to help in any way. Validate their thoughts and their feelings, but let them know that there are safe ways of handling your emotions, and that's what we're going to teach them. Anybody who's engaged in self-injury, even if it's one time in their life, they still report many more difficulties in their life, whether it be psychologically and socially. So even if you have someone who's self-injured just one time, it may not be a bad idea for them to consider seeking some type of help to deal with what may have led them to that self-harm that one time. Lastly, it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to not be okay and to not do something about it. It's okay to speak up and to ask for help. My friends, I'm Jeff Yalden, and my website is www.jeffyalden.com. Thank you for listening.